the reason I'm talking like this is because we now live in a system where people like to bitch and moan and complain, but they're comfortable about it. Yeah. Now back in the day, like I'm old and ancient. I gotta say this, bro. I gotta say this. It's gonna make me laugh, but you know, back in my time, and this was early 2000s, when I went through school and college, and I never worked my way up to university, and I'm not gonna blame anybody because it was my fault, right? I'm man enough to take accountability. People would go like, would you ever see yourself at university? Do you think you ever would have gone? And I could entertain the idea, but then at the same time, I'm like, I feel like I was destined for more, even at an early age. I think I like wholesome content online. I'm guilty of spending a lot of time on my phone. Let's just say that. But when it comes to content, I like something and I watch it, and I look over at people and I'm like, oh, yo, that's cool. But I think it's taken way out of context now because people don't really use their position, their platform, to kind of share some sort of real courage with people. Like, you've got to be brave, you've got to be, you've got to get through what you're going through. I think people know what people go through and they just sit back and let it happen. I saw a quote, right? I said, if you're gonna see someone struggle, right, or something along these lines, if you're gonna see someone struggle, it's simple: either help them or get out of their way, or don't even entertain the idea of fucking with somebody. And it gave me a really interesting an interesting flashback to when I was in those environments, not back in the day, not in my day, once upon a time, it's just, it's me sharing an experience. When I was there and I went through what I went through, there was never a time being around anybody that people would ever turn around and be like, oh, we can't do that to him, or that because he's a human being. Like he's got he's got his feelings. And back in the day, this is before I am now. Like back in the day I was, before the internet, before the government of useless cunts, knobheads, pricks, pieces of shit, right? You pick a name for them, right? And people go, but we got to respect them because they're British and they're Labour and they're political and they're a party. I'm like, but they're a bunch of they're useless. I was about to say they're a bunch of useless, you know but they are, bro. They are. They, when you watch the news, they don't bring anything to the table. And I think that's evident, even at an early age, going through my whole existence, my whole upbringing, my whole life. I can honestly say, if somebody was to point at me or someone was to look over in my direction and say, "Are you better than those people? Do you feel that you bring more to the table than they do?" And I'll be like, I don't want no smoke, but yeah, I sort of do, and that's the idea. Yeah, it's a point, but it's the idea. The idea is that we as individuals, the fact that we in ourselves know we want more, and we will always want more, and we strive to be our better selves. Some they want to come out of the dramatic situations, they want to come out of the abusive situations, they want to say, what that person does is none of my business. I'm that guy, right? Like, I don't want to be in abusive situations. I don't want to be in dramatic situations. I don't want to be in a situation where, something what someone else is doing, it's bothering me or offensive to me. It's like, you do you. You know what I mean? Like, you vote and you go there and do that, and it doesn't bother me because in reality, it just doesn't. And I feel like we live in a generation where it has to be documented, it has to be stated, people have to be slagged off, people have to be disrespected, people have to be, you just kind, you know where I'm going with this, but people have to go through it, and I'm like, why can't we break the stereotype? Why can't we look over at people? Why can't I look over at people and say, damn, now that is what I want to see more of. I would love to turn on the news. I'd love to turn on the news and be up to date with what's going on around the world and actually see some competent people there showing off their leadership, some true leadership. But I just feel that the news is a distraction. People are like, yeah, but that program was on, and now we got to watch the news. We have to know what's going on around the world, but that's the point. The point is that we don't have time for ourselves, and we never did, even at a younger age. And I'm like, is that really, is that why they win all the time? Is that why they exist to siphon money from your pockets, your wallets? Is that why they are the most corrupt of individuals? Is that why? I mean, they're not individuals, they're like a group that we can't mention. But I'm over here like, I just want to be able to, and this is me, bro, I don't want no smoke, right? I just want to be able to like work in an environment where I know that there's conflict, but I can control it, and I can be like, yo, bro, I just want to get on with what I got to get on with, right? And I just want to do well in that environment, I want to get my education. I want to work. I want to be able to build my portfolio. I want to be able to, work around people, not for people, but be able to work around people where I know that, what, the pay is good, the people are people, and everyone has a difference of opinion. We don't live in that generation, and I think going to New Park really showed me that. Yeah, I think being at New Park for the 2011, I think it was 2010 to 2013, 14, was it? I think it taught me a lot of valuable lessons. I mean, I wasn't at home, I wasn't around any of these family members. I was there, and what impressed me whilst being at New Park, I guess, was that we got up, and we didn't spend a lot of time in the classrooms. A lot of the work was in the classroom, but we did things as a class. We went for nature walks. We had activities. We just, you kind of look over at it and think, what a time.